There's one that's about you, and there's one that's about your world. The one that's about you is important because that's you to be happy and find your solace and your peace in yourself. The one that's about the world and the people outside of you, that's to help you to become a great person and influencer, but also make your world great. And the more you give to that world, the easier it will be to transform your own world.
What's up? What's up? This is the Mentally Shredded Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Whedon, and our special guest today is Johnathan Gorman. Some of you may know him from roles in Lifetime movies, Chicago PD. You may also know him from the business world. But if you have not heard this name, I promise you, take notice because he is making waves. Johnathan, it's a pleasure.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on today. I'm excited to chat and just explore the world of growth, personal growth. How do we manage our lives in this world in the most optimal level and catching up, man? So, all good.
Yes. Absolutely, absolutely. We had the opportunity to connect, I believe, on a film that we were both cast in. Correct?
Correct. Break the cycle. Faith-based movie, a film, and it was funny because it was just an unlikely meeting in the sense that they were kind of saying, okay, why don't you sit here in this scene? You had other parts that you were doing. Our parts would have never intermingled for the most part. And then just that happening of that coincidence of saying, okay, bring these two guys together in this scene. It was more background for us because we had already done our principal pieces. And then we just, hey, started the conversation. So it was cool to learn so much about you and how much we had connected in just wanting to share insight to the world, just how to become the best person we can. So that was really cool and exciting.
Yes, absolutely. It's funny that I don't believe anything happens by chance,
Right.
and you meet people in the most unique settings.
Yeah.
I look back on some of the relationships that I've built, and I'm like, how did that even happen?
Right. Exactly. Those are literally the best ones though. Those are the ones. And it's always sometimes the ones too, where you don't give the other person the benefit of the doubt. And then all of a sudden you think, oh, you have this weird inkling, like I'm not going to like them. They're not going to like me. And all these little subconscious things going on in your head. And then they become a great friend. And I think that it's like you just said, seize the opportunity at all times to let go of all of those inhibitions and those judgments and see where the journey will take you in every relationship, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, we're already spitting some fire. So this is just a little insight of what you guys are tuning into. But Johnathan, you just came out with a book. We
Yep.
definitely want to talk about that. Let's talk about just the inspiration behind the book and then what the primary focus is.
Okay, great. I mean, the book, if you would have said to me, I want to write a book, that was actually an aspiration. As a child, I had certain things that I wanted to do in life. Now, I started in the entertainment industry as, without ever really going professional, but as a singer. As a young child, I was very shy. So my parents got me into singing, and that was really my forte. And that led me into the acting world per se. But I always knew at one point I wanted to record a song. I wanted to make a movie. I wanted to write a movie, and I wanted to write a book. So those were some of the pillars that I wanted to do as a young child. So the book, I didn't probably anticipate that it was going to be a book about how do I share my personal story or how do I help people find the ways to break through challenges in their world. I probably thought it was going to be more of a novel, you know what I mean? And I'm a hopeless romantic, so it probably would have been some kind of hopeless romantic, a novel at best. And so the funny piece was that, but I've done so many things that I've dove into, just fully dove right into the fire and tried things and took some big risk in my life. And those are what caught people's eye the most. Life is going to deal you all kinds of obstacles. And so as people started to learn my story about my obstacles, the challenges that I faced, and then how do I break through those and keep my fire always alive? That's really that's stimulated the book. But the book started off of failure, believe it or not. which is really cool. I've been very successful when I got into the corporate world. I was moving through the ranks as fast as you can. I was then given a sales team, great group of people, and we hit a weird economic time. And although I knew we needed to make some changes in middle management, you don't always get to go to your strategy. And so at the end of the day, they suppressed the management. So they pushed me back down into more of a subject matter expert role. Somebody might say, well, that's not failure. But for me, if we were excelling on the most optimal level, which is there are some ideas that we all had that we wanted to do as a team and bring forward, but just weren't be accepted. I looked at that and I said, how do I make myself better so that the next time this opportunity comes, I'm aware of that? So I started writing a book about our whole subconscious and our beliefs. But as I started writing the book and I got about 60, 80 pages into the book, I was like, why would anybody buy a book from me? Like what about me makes me so unique that somebody would actually buy that? And that's that weird self-doubt that we have in ourselves, but we'll carry probably all of our life, no matter what we have, what level we're at. And so I started looking into some coursework and I end up falling into personal development coaching. And so I got certified in personal development coaching. So this book literally took 10 years in the making of actually writing. And I don't think that's by mistake. I'm a big believer of letting it maturate the right way. I didn't want to come out and write a massive level of series of books. The goal is how do you bring information forward that people can actually apply and make subtle little changes. And I say that really consciously and purposeful. Subtle little changes. Because what happens is we see the big menu of change or transformation and we put too much burden on ourselves of where we want to be at the end result. Really, we should be focusing in on the subtle little changes. There's a great neurologist out there, Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he says, if you want to change your reality, you need to change your personality. In order to change your personality, once you change your personality, you'll change your reality. And that's a really fascinating piece. And so when I wrote the book, I wanted to say, well, how do I bring my existence into it? How do I help you make subtle changes? And being in filmmaking in the corporate world and then self-development, I brought them all together. And I was like, wow, man, isn't life like a movie? Like literally, we have all these little movies inside of our world at all given times, right? But do we know how to actually bring and make a movie, bring and how to make a movie, and what are the importances of each role? And so that's really what I wanted to bring forward is why is a casting director important? How do you then correlate that into your life? How is a cinematographer important when you're selecting them? They got to know angles, perspective. How are you going to give the view to the audience to understand the comprehension of the story? Wasn't that our life? How do we view our angles? What is those perceptions? How do we want to frame our composition so that the people can see us accordingly the right way? So as you start to break down each part of the filmmaking process, how do you bring those into your life? And that's really what I wanted to do and make it fun. Change should be great and a lot of fun all the way through.
Absolutely. So I love the process and the view and focus of looking at your life like a movie. I have a good
Mhm.
friend by the name of Will, and in college he was like, I remember him saying, "Chris, you act like your life is this movie. Like that's how you operate." And I'm like, "Yeah, bro, it is."
Right,
And then when we sat down and began to discuss the purpose of your book and the foundation, I was like, I've been saying this all along,
right,
but I love that you've actually broke it down piece by piece. It's also important to understand that when you are growing and you're changing, because I believe a lot of people believe that their personality is who they are. You can't
right.
change your personality. How do you go about addressing those views and those people who are listening saying, well, am I not born with this personality? And then I've been told my whole life I can't change it. So how do you reach out and speak to those people?
Yeah, I love the question, and it's got multiple answers. And so I'll first start, in a couple worlds. I'll bring it back to your audience. And one is mentally shredded because you're a fit and you're about fitness. And so that could be the same kind of question. that you get. Well, how do I change my body? I'm big boned. I'm thick layered. I mean, you've heard all of the different things that people say. Those are stories, right? They're not necessarily truths. We can form our body any way that we want, but we have to have a strategy in that body and where do we want to go and where we want to set those goals of what do we want to accomplish. I work out all the time. I'm going to be 59 years old next week, and people look at me and they're like, no way. A guy the other day goes, wow, you look great for 40, man, when he saw my ID. And I know I'm not going to be Arnold. I know that. So I'm going to set my course the right way. So getting back to that, it's where it comes down to when you look at that is people who know you from the past, they know you of what you gave them at that moment of your life. You always have to remember when people know you, they know you for what you've given them at that point in life. So if you're talking and you're meeting somebody today, they're knowing you and getting to know you for exactly who you are today. So if it's not equating, then that's on you because that's where you are right now. So let's go back if it's somebody in the distance. Patience. You have to have patience for people. You're the creator of the personalities that you want around you, but you have to have patience for them. As you change, they have to see that. They're going to be developing. You're way ahead of them than where they are. If they're not following you on some kind of social, if they're not interacting with you, they're only going to remember the last moment of that conversation or that last moment of that engagement. So if you haven't met somebody in 20 years, you have to be honest with people. I remember when my dad got remarried and when my mom passed and we had known the woman he was going to be getting married to, our family knew her. I had not known her other than her name and who she was. I had not actually spoken to her in 30 years. And I looked at my dad and I said, "Hey, I just want you to remember that this person doesn't know me. They may think they do, but they know me 30 years ago. So allow me the opportunity to get to know them, and that will be better for everybody involved." When I meet somebody after a great period of time, I want to say, "Hey, I'm really excited to get to know you. We got to know each other 20 years ago, and I'm really excited to know what's changed in your life. What have you found that you loved and what you've gotten away with that you didn't, hey, I didn't want this anymore." Give them the opportunity to share their growth too. Don't always make it about you.
That's
You
key.
are the output. Make it about them. When everybody in your world is great and you make them great, well, if everybody in your world is great, then how could your life not be great?
Yeah.
But if
Yeah.
you're making your life great and it's all about you, you're not worried about them, well, you're going to run through a lot of chaos water. So you have to really look at it that way. You're the opinion of how you want it to be and how they see you.
Absolutely. You are in control of not only the characters that are around you in your movie, but
Yeah.
how they show up as well, because they are a reflection of you, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah. Well, it's a great piece when you say that because I've shared with my wife many times. We'll meet people and you'll hear people because that's what we do as people. There's so much judgment in the world, right? And you can't take that judgment away. That's our human frailty of who we are, right? That's our flaws. But when you hear it, you can also say, I can get to know this individual who seems to be against the grain with this community of people that I like, but I can rise bigger and better. Maybe I'm that inspiration that they've needed that can make them have a different disposition and make them more enjoyable inside of this group, inside this community. Be the leader of change and transformation. And it's not about vocally saying it. Everybody's watching you at all times. Everybody's watching you. They're listening. How many times in my life have I heard people say, "Oh my gosh, I love your." I was just recently at a celebration of life for my cousin and a person came up to me and said, "Oh my gosh, your messages on social are so impactful." I barely post, but when I do, I want to make sure that I'm being heard because I know maybe they're not liking. That's irrelevant. Everybody's watching. Remember
Mhm.
that. And if you
Yeah.
know your world and the world out there is watching you, man, you have an opportunity to be the inspiration of change at any given time.
Looking for a consulting firm that can help your organization achieve its full potential? Look no further than Deck Leadership. With over 25 years of experience in NASCAR, founders Mike Metcalf and Sean Pete know what it takes to lead high-performing teams. They can help you uncover opportunities for diversity, efficiency, culture, and kindness, all while inspiring human brilliance. And if they can lead pit crews that can change 4 tires and fill 18 gallons of gas in less than 12 seconds, just imagine what they can do for your organization. Visit www.deckleadership.com for more information. I love that this growth and mindset allows for room, not only for error, but room for acceptance of who I was in the past and who I'm growing into. And I know oftentimes we can say, "Hey, I've been working on myself, and maybe I fell short this week or this day," and there's not a lot of room for grace. And what I'm hearing and what I'm taking away from this conversation is we're constantly changing. We're constantly growing,
Yeah,
whether it's forward or backward. We're constantly, moving and changing. And so we have to allow space for that growth and allow space for grace because we are human. As you mentioned earlier, we are flawed. And so
we are.
if we don't have the perspective of, hey, you're not perfect, and that's okay,
Yeah.
we're setting ourselves up for failure.
Years ago, I had the gift, and it's crazy. You don't know what the gift comes from and why they're in your life until sometimes later. A friend of mine in grammar school, so we were young boys, right? Not even men yet. And his family moved to Washington State, and we were in Southern California. Yeah, that's where I was born and raised at the time. And so I got the opportunity to spend a summer with him and in his family. And in that summer, when we was young, it was about eighth grade or so, between seventh and eighth grade, we went to see the salmon ladders. I don't know if you've ever seen the salmon ladders, but what basically I learned about salmon is salmon, they're born and then they want to go venture out and then they want to come back home and they want to spawn back to the place of where they are and gravitate. And so when I looked at that and I thought, that's really cool. How many people in life actually do that? We go out there, we venture back, but we always want to come back to what we would call our home base. But what's really important is I looked at a salmon and I looked at the creek. And so years later, I was laying in bed and I was thinking about this. And I was thinking how powerful salmon are and how intelligent they are to know that they can go venture out and then how to come back and find their way back home. So as I was thinking about this creek, I thought, what could you be in a creek? Are you the water that's just flowing and you're not in control? Right? It's just moving. And sometimes it gets lost in a whirlwind in itself, right? Can't go upstream, it can only go one direction. Are you the sand? Are you just you have no opinion and no voice and you're just sitting mute for the most part and nobody would even recognize you or know who you are because you're just a speckle of sand. And you really become the only way anybody could ever see you is if you're in such a big community that you become one of many. And so you just blend. Or are you a rock? Man, you got great foundation and all of that, but you know what? You just sit there, you plant yourself in the ground, and maybe every once in a while something hits you enough and it moves you a fraction. But what ends up happening with the rock? It gets a lot of algae because it stays still. It gets that moss, it gets that fungus, right? Or you could be that salmon. What is the gift of the salmon is the salmon gets to run through that water in its playground. It gets to play with the sand. It gets to swirl around the rocks. It gets everything in its domain. So being a salmon in our life is the way we should be looking at it is who are we? Analyze that. Ask people, ask your community. Who are you? When you look at me, tell me what the greatest attribute you see inside of me. And what is that one attribute that you think that I could change and be very open to that? Find out so you can become the greatest salmon because maybe you'll realize what my perception is to the world is not what I actually think it is. And if that's not aligned, you got a lot of challenges ahead of you and you want to make sure you do that and align
How scary is it to actually go up to someone who's known you and say,
that.
how am I viewed? How do you view me? That in itself, that vulnerability can be scary. I don't know anybody that's actually gone up and said, man, how am I viewed? No one's come up to me and asked me that.
Yeah. Think about it. It's so uncommon, right? But let me ask you, let me put that back on you. Could you imagine what value would come from that?
Tenfold, like it's that you can't even put a number on it, because to me, I could be doing all of these things, building this foundation and what, but if the view of me is possibly a negative view and I'm not aware of that, well, how am I supposed to change something I'm not aware of? It could
Right.
also be a positive view, and maybe I'm internally just, man, am I doing enough?
Yeah.
Oh man, I'm
It's
I'm
so powerful. I asked my father-in-law that question one time. And I ask people a lot of this my thing because I want to know. It's so important for me to understand who I am and how the world views me. And it's usually received really well. So, take the leap of faith and try it. Use it as an exercise. At least do everybody who's listening, at least do it to one time in your life and try it. You'll never know unless you do it. But I asked my father-in-law that question, and I had no idea what he'd say. And he said, you are the most confident person I've ever met. The most confident person I've ever met. I don't know how you have this confidence. He says, but you do. And as I asked a lot of people that, it became my final chapter in my book. When I got to the end of my book, my last one is on, emotional intelligence and resilience and all of that. And it was because what I learned from people around me was like, dude, you're just so emotionally intelligent. You have such a way of hearing people, speaking with people, identifying exactly where they are and where they're at. Do I walk around and go, well, I'm going to be emotionally intelligent? No, it's just who I am and it's who I've become. But now I'm aware that that's how the world views me. So when I wrote that chapter was really fun because I understood that I didn't have to go out and think a whole bunch. I just had to speak to my heart of who I am. Right? So it's a different way of being. If I never know that, I also know that I've had people tell me. I had one buddy years ago in high school was a very good athlete, and he said, "You're a little cocky, you know, you think the world of yourself." I carry that. Think about it. I'm bringing it up in this conversation. I carried that forever. Not that it's good or bad. I didn't need to make it bad. It's just where it was. That's what he saw me as at that point. The guy liked me. We hung out all the time. But he saw a part of me that maybe wasn't the best person I could be with other people. And so that by understanding that, it allowed me to maturate that and recalibrate that. And how do I celebrate being athletic and around people who might have a little less level of athleticism inside of them? So as we get to know ourselves, we can now know how we want to function and how it's a value to the people around us as well.
I'm taken back to moments in my childhood where I was told that I was maybe cocky, if you will. I was a show off when it came to sports, or I was annoying and I was immature, right? And so
Right.
all of this, it becomes a part of your development when you're young. And so I started, trying to, and you want to fit in, you want to make friends when you're in school, and so you start to adjust to the people around you. And I believe
Yeah.
what I was doing was just limiting all of the gifts. I was pushing them down because I didn't feel like they were accepted. And since I wanted to
Yeah.
be accepted, I would push this part of me down and just be and show up as the person I knew, okay, this is safe. And
Yeah.
for so long, I didn't realize until my 30s, when I actually had to start rebuilding my foundation, i.e., mentally shredded, where I was like, what the heck? Right? Like I wasn't even aware that I had stopped singing. I just played soccer because I knew that was accepted, right? Like people knew me as a soccer player, but no one even knew I could sing. No one knew I could act. No one knew I had all these different, I wanted to build businesses and I wanted to do all this stuff. But once I started doing the work, it it just started coming out of me, right? Like I couldn't control it because it was in me all along. And so I encourage people, if you're listening to this, there are gifts inside of you that you either are unaware of, or they scream so loud and you are afraid to let them out. But you I personally believe my success was in my vulnerability, and my success is in the gifts that I had been pushing down. And now they're coming out. I have no idea how God is going to use this, but we wouldn't be having this conversation today.
Right. Yeah. And I always, if I would say to anybody, is remember you're the agent of change. You're the agents of transformation. Now you can take that agent of transformation two ways. There's one that's about you, and there's one that's about your world. The one that's about you is important because that's you to be happy and find your solace and your peace in yourself. The one that's about the world and the people outside of you, that's to help you to become a great person and influencer, but also make your world great. And the more you give to that world, the easier it will be to transform your own world. And I'll use this in another analogy because it's not an analogy, but an actual story. Is at the celebration of life for my cousin just recently, his sister, my other cousin, she asked me to speak on her behalf because she probably wouldn't have that strength. And so I said, sure. I didn't share my internal feelings about it. And little did she know that I get nervous as anything to get up in front of people. And now that I knew that I'm going to have to read, and especially reading, I'm a very slow reader, a very slow processor, and that's my subconscious story. And so here she is in asking me, which I come to find out at this event, because she thinks I'm the most secure person to get up in front of anybody and talk. And so we've been cousins our whole lives, 50 some years. And now we're sitting here. And then when she learned in this moment, like, wow. And then at the same time, I said to her, listen, I'm no different than you. We're both in the same space. But I believe that if you trust yourself, you'll be great. Let me be there to support you. I'll be right there to take over if you need it. But try this. I truly believe that if you try this, you'll find your inner peace and your inner strength, and you're going to get through this. And so she said she accepted that challenge, which was really cool. And she was stellar. She did a stellar job. She didn't need me. And all I did is end up looking like a standing fool behind her, right? keeping her support. And I was very appreciative to do it. But the moral of that is that we always assume the other person has these incredible gifts that we make them gifts for them that maybe they don't have. Maybe there's just not truth there. That's our perspective and that's our story about them that we've created. And so we have to remember that in life, don't assume don't assume that somebody's this. Ask them how they feel. Get deeper in conversations with people. My aunt came up to me at the same party and she said, "Now you're a Gorman, man. You love getting out in front of people. This is what we do." And I said, "No, actually, I don't." I said, "I'm very quiet and I'm very introverted, and people are shocked when they hear that I'm introverted, but am very introverted." And she says, "Well, how is that possible? Because you have so many friends and so many people know you." I said, "Because it's not about how many times I'm talking with somebody that makes them have a connection. It's that when we have a connection, it's rich, it's robust. Imagine you might not speak to somebody for 20 years, but that mark of that connection that you had with them was greater than if you spent all kinds of time with them."
Yeah.
Life isn't always about this mass quantity of what we do. It's making sure that we use quality inside of every moment that we have. So we have to become strong in ourselves to know what we want, the world we want. We have to make the people around us the most important thing that we have. And when we make them super powerful and realize that we're here to serve them, our world becomes really easy. The resistant wall becomes broken. And now you can start to explore your change on the greatest level or your transformation that you're hoping to succeed and do.
Wow. Wow. I'm looking at the time and I'm like,
Yeah.
how the heck has it been 30 minutes already?
Right.
We could talk for hours, as we know from our
Yes.
time grabbing coffee.
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
so I do real quick before we wrap up, because
Yeah.
we want to be respectful of everyone's time. I just want to say, first off, thank you so much for showing up as authentically you from the first moment I've met you to today. Thank you for just
Yeah.
pouring into our audience, because my cup is absolutely filled. And
Thank you.
I honestly look forward to every conversation that we have, because I always know it's going to be fire. So just
Likewise.
thank you from the bottom of my heart again.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And anybody who's listening, I appreciate your time and allowing me to share my insight of my growth in the world and my experiences.
So before we ask where we can follow you, how we can support you,
Yeah.
where we can purchase the book, I like to end each episode with an affirmation. So I say I am, and then I have you finish that sentence for yourself. And so
Wow.
let's go ahead and get started. So I am.
Courageous.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
And I see
Yeah.
that, and I honestly, looking at your life, looking at the career you've built, that speaks to me. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
It's scary. It's a scary world out there. I'm scared every day of it. If we didn't have that, it would be hard. So,
Yeah,
great question.
absolutely.
I didn't
Absolutely.
expect it, and so that was cool.
Yeah, of course, of course. So how can we support you, Jonathan? Where can we find you on social, your website, so forth?
Yeah, so to find the book, the book is Your Life is Your Movie. Okay. And the best way to find that is on my actual website. That's where you can buy it directly. And that's at Inspired by JG. So inspiredbyjg.com. And you'll find the book there. So you can purchase it right there. If you're going to follow me on social media, then Instagram, it's Gorman JF. So that's pretty easy, Gorman JF. And then I'm on Facebook, Johnathan. Just make sure when you spell Johnathan, it's Johnathan, Gorman, Gorman. And my wife's always giving me credit for, following everybody that sends me a message that they want to be connected. But I believe just getting connected in the world is so important. Share a message that you heard this, if you buy the book, send me, you're going to have my email address, it's inspired, Jay Gorman at inspiredbyjg.com. Send me an email, ask me a question. I'm here to help. I even do have some coaching that you can purchase on my actual website if you're looking at getting into the entertainment industry and you want some professional acting, or you want just some reigniting my fire. I believe that's a whole big piece of it. You can buy that on the site itself. And if you can't afford it, talk to me. Shoot me an email. Make the world happen. So that's the best ways to reach me. But I hope, everybody who has been buying it, it's shocking. Everybody likes it for different reasons. And, you know, I always say, make it simple, keep it easy. Find the one thing out of there. Because if, for $30, you can find one thing that's going to transform your life. That's huge value.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you again, Jonathan. Thank you, as always, for tuning in to this episode. If there was anything that you can take away from this, we ask that you share it. We want to thank our sponsors for making this possible. If you would like to learn how to be a sponsor, please reach out. You can find us at www.christopherdwhedon.com. Also, mentally shredded foundation.com. I just added that URL, so I was a little confused when I said it. But thank you again, as always, for tuning in. And until next time, love y'all. Peace.